Hello everybody. So today's lesson is going to be for Tuesday, May 5th. You do not have a bell ringer today. We're going to do 2 slides, 1 writing slide, 1 picture slide, and also you have a TED Ed to watch. I'll post the link obviously in the discussion thread. The TED Ed is What is McCarthyism? We have made it. Here we are. Finally, we have made it to Joe McCarthy, my favorite person. He's terrible. He's the worst. I'm so excited. And the 1 slide that we're doing today is just about Joe McCarthy. I needed just one slide for the whole lesson, plus we're going to stare at some pictures. So, and this TED Ed. Here we are. I'm so pumped. I'm very excited. Okay, a quick reminder though before we get into the slides. On Thursday, we're going to have another Twilight Zone live stream. It's our last Twilight Zone that we're going to watch for the year, which is really sad, but it's a good one, so be there. That's on Canvas under conferences. It's at 3 o'clock on Thursday, okay? All right, so let's recap some of the stuff that we talked about last time. Last time we talked about the nuclear family and television and baby boomers. So this idea of what a perfect family is during the Cold War and how can you prove that you are not a communist and that you're not a communist spy is by living like these families, right? Like you have this Leave It to Beaver mindset of what a family is, and you have TV shows like I Love Lucy and these whole views of like, okay, this is how the wife should be acting, and this is how the husband should be acting, and this is how my teenage son or daughter should be acting, and that is going to put a lot of pressure on people during the Cold War, especially because we're already living with a lot of anxiety and fear from a potential nuclear threat. You have people putting in bomb shelters and stuff, so we have this whole idea of the nuclear family, which directly came from the fears of nuclear war. And I have this picture. I really like this picture right here. I mean, it's a cartoon, but you can see that's totally nuclear family. It's, mom, dad, 2.5 kids, white picket fence, and a dog. Right. And these things don't exist. Like, it's not real. It's not an ideal thing for us to kind of shoot for because it's not fair. It's not fair. Every family is different. We also have television shows like The Twilight Zone, Thursday, be there, that warn us about the way that we're living, right? And we need to kind of realize that if we don't stop and we continue down this path, then it can be harmful for society as a whole. So there not every single television show or advertisement was a positive thing, and a lot of them was kind of like a warning, right? Like, hey, we need to kind of realize what we're doing here and how we're behaving. I think that's it. Television, the baby boom, men coming back from World War II, being able to purchase a home with the GI Bill, living in suburbs, baby boom. It's a generation. Okay, 36 and 37. So this is a slide. It's literally just titled Joe McCarthy. And you have 2 vocab words. It's Joe McCarthy and McCarthyism. So Joe McCarthy, Joseph McCarthy, was a senator from Wisconsin. And how his fame came about is he was giving a speech to a Republicans women's group in West Virginia, and Joe McCarthy was a Republican. And so he was giving a speech to this group of women in West Virginia, and the topic of communism came up and how dangerous it is and how scary it is. And in the speech, McCarthy claimed that there were 205 known communists working in the United States Department of State. He even went as far as waving around a list of names in the air. This is Joe McCarthy. So when people think of McCarthyism and Joe McCarthy in itself, usually when people think about him, or people today, like sometimes on the news, will use him as an example or his tactics, because he was spreading fear and false information with no facts. No facts. So he decided that he was going to stand up and give a speech and wave around a list that he's got 205 known, there's 205 names on here, confirmed communists. Listen, I work in the government and I know for sure that 205 people are communists and they work in your government too. Look, it's right here. Look, It's right here. Can you see? Can you see it back here? Right, they're right there. You see the names? Senator McCarthy, can we see? Because we need to get them out of there. If they're working in our government, like we need to make sure that they're gone and that we don't vote for them again and that they should be persecuted. No, I can't give you this list because it's mine, and I'm not gonna give it to you. Okay, there were no names on the list. McCarthyism, which is your vocab word right down there, tactic of spreading fear and making baseless claims without any evidence. So a lot of people were like, oh, that's, ignorance and stuff. Well, he took it one step further because he was in a position of power. He was in our government. And for him to say that he knows confirmed people that are communists, and they work in our government, our federal government, they're in charge of us and protecting us. The State Department is in charge of working with other countries to make sure that we're friends and not enemies. And that's scary. If they're working in the State Department, right, they're supposed to make sure that we're good to go and won't get attacked. So Joe McCarthy was a liar, and because of his actions, it just made everything so much worse. So everyone started to rally with him and be like, oh God, like there's communists working in the United States government, like let's go, we got to get them. There was no list. And then on top of that, the list, it just changed, like the numbers, right? Like he would be like, oh, there's actually 190 people on this list. Well, Senator McCarthy, the other day you said it was 205. Yeah, that's what I meant. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just spreading fear. And it's making it worse. McCarthy's charges created sensation, but he never produced the list of names he claimed to be holding in his speech. A Senate committee looked into his charges and found no evidence of communists in the State Department. So they did an investigation. There was no evidence. The damage was already done. McCarthy had earned his reputation as the nation's top communist fighter. He made many new charges, but none were backed with any evidence. And when people complained, he suggested that they have secrets to hide. So I highly recommend watching the TED Ed video and I took a whole page of notes on it, because this is, if you are asking yourself, like, why didn't anyone stop him? Like, why didn't people say, like, well, you're being crazy? It's because if you spoke up against him, then he would say, like, oh, you're hiding something, or are you a communist? Only communists would want to stop me because I'm the top fighter of communists, and people during this time wanted somebody who was tough on communism. Today we might hear something like, oh, this judge or so and so is tough on crime, like let's get the criminals off the street. Well, he was tough on communism, and a lot of people really supported that. So journalists and leaders were scared to speak up because they didn't want to be looked at as a target, or like they didn't want all the eyes to be on them. So they just kind of let it go, or they worked with him. Okay, well, maybe I can advance my political career if I'm with McCarthy, because maybe someday I want to run for president, or maybe someday I want to work in the House of Representatives. So you were scared to say anything because you didn't want that to ruin your career. It's spineless. Eventually, somebody did stand up, and it was during one of the hearings of somebody accused of being a communist, and it was one of the most famous times or moments in history during the Cold War for somebody to speak up, and he was a senator, and say, like, Senator McCarthy, you are crazy, basically. And he stood up against him, and it was amazing because it just takes one person. And because that one senator stood up against Joe McCarthy, then everyone felt confident enough to stand up to him and be like, yeah, I really agree with this, and I've agreed with it since he started this. So it just takes one person. Journalists widely and leaders widely exaggerated dangers of communism. So propaganda was huge. Of course, like, people are going to look at these things and become more scared of it, right? That's the whole point of, like, propaganda. And it's called yellow journalism, if you remember from American history, right? You're just exaggerating the information to get people's attention. And that's what was happening. Because if you want information to spread quickly and you want it to stick in people's brains, then you're going to use propaganda. And that's what people did with communism, right? I mean, it's striking fear and paranoia in people constantly because you're showing the worst sides of something. McCarthy would produce fake photographs of individuals to prove that they were radicals. The House Un-Americans Activities Committee, if you remember that from American history last year, that was the organization in the federal government that would conduct investigations. Basically, the federal government would just, like, pick people and be like, oh, communist, and your career could be completely destroyed. If you are accused of being a communist or something, it's like, oh, wow, like, oh my gosh, they think that I'm a communist. How do I prove that I'm not? And you're sitting on trial in front of the federal government and you have to prove that you are not a communist. And that is very scary. And your whole life could be ruined because even if you're found not guilty and you go back home, people are like, oh wow, like how'd they get out of that one? They're still a communist. Richard Nixon actually was a big communist fighter before he was president of the United States, which is probably one of the reasons why he was elected president of the United States, is because he was tough on communism. Bobby Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's brother, was a lawyer, and he was one of the lawyers that were prosecuting people for Joe McCarthy, and he later came out and apologized for that. You know, he came out and said, I'm very sorry. I should not have fallen into Joe McCarthy's traps. And he apologized for it. And, where else do I have? McCarthyism quickly spread into the other branches of government, universities, labor unions, private businesses. Everybody was paranoid. Everybody was fearful that potentially this person or the person next to them, whatever, could be working for the Soviet Union. He made things worse. He made things worse, and he got so much attention because he worked in government, and he lied, and he had no evidence, and he took people's fear and he used it for his own advantage, and it's shiesty and it's terrible. He is an awful human being. Oh, J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI at the time, and this was his prime time. Like, he was like, all right, if the FBI is going to be used for anything, it's going to be catching communists. And he worked very closely with Senator McCarthy and, you know, would wiretap people's phones and conduct investigations on people who thought to be communists. They even did investigations on Martin Luther King Jr. They would tap into his phones to think they thought that he was a communist, right? Or anybody that's a radical, anybody that's doing radical things, which of course civil rights at the time was viewed as radical. Granting people equal rights is a crazy thing. It's a radical thing. So they tried to stop him. They tried to conduct an investigation and find him guilty of being a radical or a communist or having these crazy beliefs. Like, God forbid somebody gets equal rights or being treated equally. So J. Edgar Hoover was a terrible human being, and he was FBI director for many years. He also is believed to have been gay, and having hid that for many years, people think that he kind of like took that out on a lot of people and targeted people and made people's lives, really rough because he was hiding that and he couldn't be his true self. So that's just an idea. People who have done studies on him since this has been over with. So McCarthy soon went after fellow Republicans and the United States Army, and people believed that that was going too far, which it absolutely was. The fear of communism was still there, but his career would not be. So think back to the Great Depression with the bonus army, the soldiers who were, after World War I, they wanted their pensions, and they were protesting in D.C., and Herbert Hoover, the president, said that these protesters are communists, and people were like, oh, you cannot call veterans communists, and so that ended his career for sure, and he was not reelected president. So when you start to target, veterans or our military, these people protect our country, that's taking it way too far. So people thought like, oh, he's losing it. And he was 100% losing it with all his power that he had now gained. He was losing his mind, and he actually drank himself to death. So he died from alcoholism. This is him conducting an investigation he's got his evidence, which is fake photographs, right? This quote at the bottom says, I have here in my hand a list of 205 people that were known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who nevertheless are still working and shaping the policy of the State Department. That was the speech that he gave. Oh, look, here he is. He's holding his list of communists. Hey, can we see that? No, it's mine. You can't see it. It's because it's not real. Right? He was lying, and he used people's fear for his advantage, and he made things worse. Okay, he made things worse. Go ahead and watch the TED Ed video. I'm telling you, it's such a good one, and you learn a lot about McCarthyism and the fears that it has, and this power that it has because we're scared. And can it happen today, right? I mean, just because McCarthy was during the Cold War doesn't mean that McCarthyism can't be used at any time period. So that is a scary thought. That is it. Don't forget to write your summary for that slide, and I'll see you guys later.